Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, so, usually when we talk about diagnosing a problem, like whether it's a medical issue or a structural flaw in a house or even just a bug in some code, there's this baseline expectation of precision.
Right.
Oh,
yeah, absolutely. You want it to be like engineering.
Exactly. You want it to be clear. You break your arm, you get an x-ray, and it shows that little jagged white line on the black film, and the doctor just, points a pen at it and says, there it is, that's the fracture.
Right. It's binary. It's either broken or it's not. And we find an immense amount of comfort in that kind of categorization.
We really do.
I'd like our problems to be visible, quantifiable, and just neatly labeled.
Right, because if you can label it, you can fix it. But then, and this is where today's topic comes in, you step into the world of ancient apocalyptic literature, and suddenly it feels like that X-ray machine has just completely short-circuited.
Yeah, the machine is smoking at that point.
Literally.
Yeah.
We are looking at this diagnostic landscape of the human soul, of societal corruption, the literal end of history, and it is incredibly murky. I mean, instead of clean lines and clinical diagnoses, we are handed dragons, multi-headed beasts, stars falling from the sky, and cities made of crystal.
Right. The imagery is just overwhelming.
It really is. As a modern reader, my first instinct is usually, what on earth am I supposed to do with this?
Which is, frankly, a completely fair reaction.
Exactly.
I mean, it's the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters for the 21st century mind.
Yeah.
It requires a totally different set of interpretative tools to decipher. Because if you approach this text with the same literal empirical mindset that you use to read a medical journal or a news report, you are going to misread it completely.
And that brings us to the core mission for today's deep dive. We are going on an immersive exploration of one of the most debated, fascinating, and honestly intimidating texts ever written in human history.
The final chapters of the book of Revelation.
Exactly. Specifically, chapters 19 through 22. So our goal today is to basically act as guides for you through this labyrinth. We want to extract the practical wisdom, the moral insight, and the real-world life application from this highly symbolic ancient text.
Right, because we aren't here to draw charts predicting the end of the world.
No, definitely not. We are here to figure out how this ancient text tells us to live right now, today.
And to do that effectively, we're leaning on some incredibly robust historical sources. We're primarily looking at the World English Bible translation of the text itself, just to get a really clear sense of the language.
Right.
But because of the dense symbolism, we're pairing that text with two absolute heavyweights of historical and theological commentary, Albert Barnes and Matthew Henry.
Those guys are legends in this space.
They really are. These are scholars who spent their entire lives decoding this exact imagery, looking past the surface-level dragons and beasts to find the enduring spiritual and moral principles underneath.
Okay, but before we dive into the dragons and the crystal cities, we have to lay down some foundational context, because I think one of the biggest mistakes people make with this book is just ripping it out of its original time and place.
Oh, 100%. Context is everything here.
So who is actually writing this, and what is the reality of the people receiving this letter?
Well, we have to rewind to the late 1st century. The author, traditionally identified as John, is writing to a persecuted church, specifically 7 communities in Asia Minor who are facing immense, crushing trials.
Like life or death trials.
Exactly. Imagine being a small, marginalized community living under the absolute unyielding weight of the Roman Empire, likely during the reign of the Emperor Domitian.
And Domitian wasn't exactly known for his tolerance of alternative belief systems, right?
Not at all. The imperial cult was heavily enforced. I mean, emperor worship wasn't just a religious activity. It was a test of civic loyalty.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you refused to participate, as these early Christians did, you weren't just seen as religiously eccentric. You were viewed as an enemy of the state.
So it was treason, basically.
Basically, yeah. You faced total social ostracization, severe economic boycotts, meaning you literally couldn't buy or sell in the trade guilds, and eventually lethal violence.
Man. So these are people whose entire world feels like it's ending right now. Their friends are being thrown into coliseums, their businesses are ruined, their families are starving.
Yes.
And John sends them. this? Like a book filled with terrifying monsters and plagues. Why use this specific psychedelic genre of apocalyptic literature? Why not just write a straightforward letter saying, hey guys, hang in there, God is with you?
Right, it seems counterintuitive, but apocalyptic literature is essentially the underground resistance literature of the ancient world.
Oh, like a code.
Yeah. Exactly like a code. When you're living under a totalitarian regime that monitors everything, you can't just write an open letter stating that the emperor is a corrupt tyrant and Rome is going to fall. If that gets intercepted, and you get executed.
Yeah, that's a quick way to get killed.
Right. So you use code. You use deeply entrenched cultural and religious symbols from the Hebrew Bible. Imagery your community will instantly recognize, but that will just sound like absolute gibberish to a Roman censor.
That's fascinating. It's subversive. It's an encrypted message of hope.
It is. The vivid, sometimes terrifying imagery wasn't meant to scare the audience at all. It was meant to comfort them.
Yeah.
It was pulling back the curtain on reality.
Right.
Which is actually what the Greek word apocalypsis means, an unveiling.
An unveiling.
Right. It was showing them the final triumph of truth and righteousness over these corrupt, oppressive systems. It was essentially telling them, hold on, the ultimate power in the universe is not the Roman emperor who is oppressing you. He's just a beast, and his time is limited.
Ultimate justice is coming. You know, knowing that completely changes the tone of the book. It transforms it from like a horror movie into a rescue mission. So let's look at the very first scene of our exploration today, starting in chapter 19.
Okay, let's do it.
The opening image is just wild. We hear this massive, deafening roar from a great multitude in heaven, and they're all shouting, hallelujah.
Yeah, it's a huge celebration.
And they aren't just shouting it randomly. They're shouting it specifically because a figure known as the Great Prostitute, often referred to symbolically as Babylon, has finally been judged and destroyed.
Yes, and the text establishes a crucial philosophical point right away here. Before we can see the ultimate restoration of the world, we first have to witness the complete dismantling of the ultimate corruption.
You can't just build over it.
Exactly. You cannot build the new, perfect city until the old, toxic one is entirely torn down. The foundation has to be clear.
And Matthew Henry's commentary on this is scathing. He notes that this system, this Babylon, was a mother, nurse, and nest of idolatry, lewdness, and cruelty.
Those are strong words.
Very strong. So we're not talking about a city with just a few bad politicians. We're talking about an entire socioeconomic and political apparatus that exists solely to exploit humanity.
Right. And Babylon, in the context of John's readers, was very clearly a coded reference to Rome. But conceptually, it represents any human system throughout history that elevates itself to divine status, monetizes human misery, and crushes the marginalized for the sake of luxury and power.
To bring that into a modern context, because obviously most of us aren't living under first century Roman rule, think about the most deeply toxic, corrupt corporate culture you can imagine.
Oh, yeah, we've all seen those.
Right, a massive institution where lying, exploitation, and stepping on the vulnerable are not just ignored, they are actively incentivized. They're rewarded by leadership.
Yeah, a place where environmental destruction is just a line item on a budget, and human beings are treated as entirely disposable resources.
Exactly. In those systems, doing the right thing, acting with actual integrity penalizes you. It makes you a target.
Right, because you're threatening the system.
Yeah. So imagine the sheer relief, the profound, unadulterated joy you would feel when that specific system is finally irrevocably dismantled.
Oh, it'd be incredible.
When the corruption is fully exposed to the light of day, the oppressive leaders are removed and the exploitation stops permanently. The relief you feel in that hypothetical moment is just a microscopic fraction of the cosmic hallelujah happening here in chapter 19.
That's a great way to frame it.
It is the universe itself exhaling because systemic institutional oppression has been utterly broken. True justice is finally prevailing.
And what's truly fascinating is the immediate pivot the text makes right after that. The moment the ashes of Babylon begin to settle, the tone shifts from this solemn severity of judgment to an overwhelming, intimate joy.
Right, we move directly from an execution to a wedding.
Exactly. The text introduces the marriage of the Lamb. This is a metaphor for the ultimate union between the divine and the faithful community, the church.
John describes the bride being arrayed in bright, pure, fine linen. And I find the wardrobe change here really interesting, especially coming right off the heels of Babylon's destruction.
Oh, it's a very intentional literary contrast. Matthew Henry points out that Babylon, the harlot, was described earlier in the book as being dressed in purple, scarlet, gold, and precious stones.
Like super flashy.
Extremely flashy. She was draped in the ultimate symbols of worldly wealth, superficial power, and the economic exploitation of the ancient world. I mean, the dye used for purple clothing in the first century was astronomically expensive. It was the color of emperors and the ultra-elite.
So it represented a system that basically bled others dry just to adorn itself.
Exactly. But the bride's dress is completely different.
Entirely. She wears fine, clean, bright linen.
Right. It's not ostentatious. It's not gaudy. It's a robe of absolute purity and universal holiness. But the best part is the text doesn't leave us to guess what this fabric represents.
Yeah.
It explicitly defines it. It says, "For the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints."
That is such a vital detail. It's not like it's a magical robe handed out arbitrarily. The fabric of this union is woven from the actual lived integrity of the people. It's their righteous acts.
Yes.
But, you know, right after this beautiful, triumphant imagery, John does something that I honestly find a bit baffling.
Oh, the angel scene.
Yeah. He is so overwhelmed by this vision and by the angel who is basically acting as his tour guide, that he literally drops to the ground and falls at the angel's feet to worship him. I mean, he just saw the ultimate destruction of idolatry with Babylon, and 10 seconds later, he's committing idolatry.
Right.
What is happening psychologically here?
Well, it really highlights the stubbornness of human frailty, doesn't it? The angel sharply rebukes him. The angel says, "See thou do it not. I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God."
It is a profound moment of wisdom and discernment hidden right in the middle of this grand apocalyptic narrative. But why would John, of all people, make that mistake?
Because awe is a really powerful, disorienting emotion. When we encounter something truly beautiful, powerful, or undeniably true, our human instinct is to cling to the immediate, tangible source of that experience.
We conflate the messenger with the message.
Exactly. The angel is delivering a divine truth, and John is so moved by the truth that he tries to deify the mailman.
Wow. And we see this exact same psychological flaw playing out constantly today. We do it with thought leaders, with charismatic politicians, podcast hosts, self-help gurus.
Oh, all the time.
Someone articulates a truth that resonates deeply with us, or they build a system that seems to work. And instead of valuing the truth itself, we elevate the person to a status they were never meant to hold.
We build cults of personality. And the danger, as the angel points out, is that no human, and apparently no angel, is equipped to handle that kind of reverence.
Yeah.
When we idolize the messengers of truth, we set ourselves up for devastation when those messengers inevitably prove to be flawed, finite, or fallible.
Because they always do.
They always do. So the angel redirects John's focus immediately. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. The focus must entirely be on the Creator, the ultimate source of truth, not the creature delivering the message.
It really makes you stop and wonder, where in your own life are you giving undue reverence or worship to modern messengers? Are there influencers or leaders that you're elevating above the actual underlying truth they claim to represent?
Right.
The text is giving us a very stark warning here. Appreciate the pointer, but for heaven's sake, do not worship the pointer. Look at what it is pointing to.
That's a perfect distillation of the warning. And this actually leads us right into the second half of chapter 19, where the narrative shifts gears radically.
Yes, it really does. The bride is ready. She's in her fine linen, but the physical reality of the world still contains entrenched violent opposition. The old system of Babylon is gone, but the physical leaders of the rebellion are still in play.
Yeah, the fight isn't over yet.
Right. So we go from a joyous wedding feast straight into a war zone. It's the ultimate showdown.
And the imagery here is among the most striking and debated in the entire book.
Okay, so heaven opens, and John sees a rider on a white horse. This rider is called Faithful and True. He wears many crowns, he has eyes like a flame of fire, and his robe is dipped in blood. He is given the name the Word of God, and he is followed by the armies of heaven, also on white horses, wearing that same fine, clean linen.
It's an epic scene.
It is, but I have to push back hard on this section, because this text suddenly introduces a level of extreme militant violence that feels entirely disconnected from the idea of a peaceful bride.
I know exactly what you mean.
The text says a sharp sword comes out of the writer's mouth to strike the nations. He will rule them with an iron rod. He is treading the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of God. And then there's this frankly grotesque call to the birds of the air to gather for a great supper of God, where they are invited to eat the flesh of kings, captains, and mighty men.
Yeah, it's pretty graphic.
How on earth are we supposed to extract enduring moral wisdom from such terrifying, gory imagery? It reads like an ancient revenge fantasy.
That is the essential, unavoidable question when dealing with the book of Revelation. If you read this as a literal military blueprint, you end up with a terrifying theology of divine butchery.
Right.
But we have to lean heavily on Albert Barnes's commentary here to decode how apocalyptic metaphor actually functions. Let's look really closely at the weapons of this battle. Notice where the sword is located.
Out of his mouth.
Exactly. It is not in the writer's hand. It proceeds out of his mouth. Barnes emphasizes that this is the key to understanding the entire conflict. The enemies are not being cut down by physical steel. They are being subdued by a word.
Oh, so the sword is a metaphor for speech, for truth.
Precisely. The effect produced here is a moral and spiritual effect, not a physical massacre. The word of God is confronting the lies of the nations. And look at the writer's robe. John notes that it is dipped in blood before the battle even begins.
Wait, really? Before?
Yes, before. The armies of heaven haven't fought yet. No enemy has been engaged, but the writer's garment is already stained.
Okay, that's interesting.
Historically and theologically, this is widely interpreted to mean it is his own blood. It represents his prior self-sacrifice on the cross, not the blood of his vanquished enemies.
Wow.
He enters the ultimate battle having already paid the ultimate price, having already secured the victory through his own suffering.
That completely flips the image on its head. The violence we are reading about is actually the piercing, unyielding nature of truth, completely dismantling systemic lies. It's the severity of justice confronting deep corruption.
Yes.
But who exactly is he fighting?
Well, the opposition is led by two specific figures, the beast and the false prophet. Matthew Henry provides a brilliant categorization of these two entities. He defines the beast as the embodiment of tyranny, unjust, brute political and military power.
Okay.
And he defines the false prophet as the embodiment of idolatry, policy, and institutionalized falsehood. Propaganda, essentially.
So the beast is the one who forces you to comply through violence, and the false prophet is the one who brainwashes you into thinking the beast is actually the good guy.
Precisely. If we connect this to the broader arc of human history, this isn't just an ancient prophecy about Rome. This is the eternal human struggle.
Yeah.
It is truth versus institutionalized deception. It is self-sacrificing integrity versus oppressive dominating power.
To translate this into our modern reality, I mean, in the 21st century, our greatest conflicts are rarely fought with literal swords on horseback. They are wars of ideas.
Absolutely.
They're battles of truth versus deepfakes, algorithmic manipulation, coordinated disinformation campaigns, and systemic institutional deception. We see leaders operating exactly like the beast and the false prophet, using raw power combined with sophisticated propaganda to control narratives and oppress people.
It's incredibly relevant.
It really is. But the wisdom of this text is revealing how that opposition is ultimately defeated. The weapon of ultimate victory is the truth, the sword of the mouth. It is not physical violence, and crucially, it is not adopting the enemy's tactics.
That is a vital point. Think about the armies of heaven. They are wearing fine white linen. You don't wear white linen to a literal mud and blood sword fight unless you expect the battle to be fought on entirely different terms. They are armed only with the righteousness of their acts and the truth spoken by their leader.
It makes you question how we handle conflict today. When you're facing intense opposition, maybe a toxic situation in your workplace, a bitter conflict in your community, or even a deep ideological divide in your own family, what weapon do you instinctively reach for?
Yeah, that's the real question.
Do you rely on the sword of the mouth, meaning clear, unyielding truth, honest communication, and uncompromised integrity? Or do you resort to the aggressive, deceptive, win-at-all-costs tactics of the very systems you are trying to fight?
Because if you try to fight the beast by becoming a beast yourself,
you haven't won anything. You've just changed the management. The only weapon that actually secures a lasting victory over deception is truth.
it requires an immense amount of discipline to trust that truth alone is a sufficient weapon against entrenched power. But as chapter 19 closes, the beast and the false prophet are defeated. The institutional structures of tyranny and propaganda are thrown into the lake of fire. They are permanently removed from the board.
Which brings us to chapter 20 and a huge shift in focus. With the institutional powers defeated, the narrative goes deeper. It targets the root cause of evil itself, symbolized here as the dragon or Satan.
Yes, and the text explores a massive what-if scenario. What happens to humanity when external systemic evil is completely removed from the environment?
We are drilling down to the bedrock of human behavior now. This chapter contains one of the most fiercely debated concepts in all of historical theology.
But without a doubt.
Right, the millennium. So John describes an angel coming down from heaven, holding the key to the abyss in a great chain. The angel seizes the dragon, binds him, and seals him in the abyss for 1,000 years so that he cannot deceive the nations anymore.
1,000 years of restraint.
Exactly. And during this 1,000-year period, John sees the souls of those who had been martyred, those who refused to worship the beast. And the text says they came to life and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. It calls this the first resurrection.
Yes.
So, let's unpack this. Are we talking about a literal zombie apocalypse of righteous martyrs rising from the grave to set up a geopolitical government in Jerusalem for exactly 10 centuries? Because honestly, that is how a lot of modern readers interpret this.
It is a very popular interpretation today, definitely. But it is one that Albert Barnes, one of our primary commentators, argues vehemently against.
Okay, why?
Barnes suggests that reading this entirely literally breaks the established rules of the genre. Revelation is a book of symbols.
Right, we established that.
The beast isn't a literal seven-headed monster walking out of the Mediterranean Sea. It's a symbol for an empire. The harlot isn't a literal woman. She's a symbol for corrupt commerce. Therefore, Barnes argues, we must interpret the first resurrection symbolically as well.
So if it's not physical bodies resurrecting to rule a physical city, what is it?
Barnes argues that it means the principles of the martyrs will live again and dominate society.
The principles.
Right. Think of it like a global, spiritual, and moral renaissance. Imagine a period in human history where true religion, peace, intelligence, uncompromised integrity, and justice have total ascendancy on the earth. It would be as if the greatest saints of the past, the people who stood up to tyranny and died for the truth, had returned to lead society.
Oh, I see.
Their memories are honored. Their values become the dominant cultural operating system.
So it's a golden age, an era where the external temptations, the systemic corruptions, and the widespread deceptions of the devil are completely bound and restrained, allowing for just unparalleled human flourishing.
Yes. But it's what happens at the end of this 1,000 years that is truly shocking and honestly deeply unsettling for modern sensibilities.
It honestly blew my mind when I read it. The text says that when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan will be released from his prison for a little while. He goes out to deceive the nations again, and immediately he is able to gather a massive global army referred to as Gog and Magog from the four corners of the earth.
Immediately.
Their numbers are like the sand of the sea. They march across the earth and surround the camp of the saints. I mean, I have so many questions here. First of all, what on earth are Gog and Magog?
Well, Gog and Magog are ancient symbolic references drawn from the book of Ezekiel in the Hebrew Bible.
Okay.
In Ezekiel, they represent the ultimate chaotic, hostile nations at the fringes of the known world who gather to destroy God's people. So by John's time, Gog and Magog had basically become a shorthand, a cultural idiom for the final unyielding rebellion of humanity against the divine order.
Okay, so it's the ultimate rebel army. But here's my biggest pushback. How is this even possible?
What do you mean?
If humanity has just experienced 1,000 years of absolute utopia, a perfect environment, perfect justice, no systemic oppression, no external demonic deception, why would anyone, let alone an army the size of the sand on the seashore, choose to follow the dragon the second he gets out? Doesn't this totally contradict our deeply held modern belief that bad behavior is entirely the result of bad environments? We tend to think that if we just fix poverty, if we fix education, if we build the perfect socioeconomic system, crime and cruelty will naturally disappear because human beings are fundamentally good.
It absolutely contradicts that modern assumption, 100%. This is an immense obstacle to growth for the optimistic humanist philosophies of our time.
Yeah, it really is.
Both Barnes and Henry lean heavily into this uncomfortable truth here. This text argues that human nature remains essentially flawed and corruptible, even in a perfect environment.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. Barnes notes that during the millennium, when evil is restrained and righteousness is the cultural norm, millions of people will likely conform to the culture of peace simply because it is socially advantageous.
Right, it's just the law of the land.
Exactly. It's profitable to be good when goodness is the dominant currency. But, Barnes argues, humans are still born with frailties, ego, and internal passions.
So they're just playing along.
Yes. Once the external restraint of the millennium is lifted, and an alternative is presented by the released dragon, the unconverted portions of the world, those who only behaved well because of peer pressure or a good system, will violently throw off what Barnes calls the irksome restraints of purity.
They were compliant, but they weren't transformed.
Exactly. The text is demanding that we look at the internal landscape of the human soul, not just the external structures of society. You can have 1,000 years of environmental perfection, but the second the door is left open, the unhealed internal fractures of humanity will still lead to rebellion. True transformation has to be internal. Environmental conformity is not the same thing as a transformed heart.
That is a profound challenge to how we view our own goodness. It really makes you wonder about your own native character.
Oh, definitely.
Like when the external rules, the social pressures, the eyes of your peers, the threat of getting caught, when all of that is stripped away, what do you default to? Do you do the right thing when there's absolutely no social reward for doing it and no punishment for avoiding it?
Right.
Because this ancient text is arguing that external peace will not save us if our internal compass is still broken.
And that profound truth, the necessity of evaluating the internal compass, sets the stage perfectly for what happens next in the text. The final rebellion of Gog and Magog is quickly and decisively quelled by fire from heaven. The time for testing, the era of human probation, is officially over. And we arrive at the ultimate conclusion.
The final judgment.
Yes.
Which might be the most intimidating image in the entire book. We are in the second half of chapter 20 now. Stripped of all the complex metaphors, no more dragons, no more beasts, no more armies. We are just left with a throne. All right. I saw a great white throne, and him who sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away. There was found no place for them.
The sheer scale of that image is staggering.
It is. The universe itself is trying to retreat from the intensity of this presence, but there's nowhere to go. And then John sees the dead, small and great, standing before God.
Notice that specific detail. Small and great. It is the ultimate equalizer. No one's earthly wealth, status, political power, or obscurity exempts them from this moment. The emperor stands on the exact same level ground as the enslaved person.
And then the text says the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged out of the things which were written in the books according to their works. I want to dig into these books. What exactly are we talking about here? Is this a literal library in the sky?
Matthew Henry provides a brilliant psychological and theological analysis of these books. He says they represent 3 distinct records.
Okay.
First, the books of God's omniscience. This is the perfect, unalterable memory of the universe. Every action, every motive, every hidden thought is perfectly recorded in the fabric of reality.
That alone is terrifying. In an era where we are incredibly anxious about our data privacy, about algorithms tracking our search history, the idea of absolute cosmic omniscience is staggering. What is the second book?
The second, Henry says, is the book of the sinner's conscience. Henry notes that this book is often kept secret, suppressed, or heavily edited by our own egos during our lifetimes.
Oh, we rewrite our own history all the time.
Exactly. We rationalize our bad behavior. We rewrite our narratives to make ourselves the hero. But here, at the White Throne, the Book of Conscience is forced open wide for all to read. We will finally see ourselves with absolute unvarnished clarity.
You just can't lie to yourself anymore. And the third book?
The third is the Statute Book of Heaven, which represents the rule of life, the absolute standard of truth and justice by which the other books are measured. And people are judged strictly according to their works, as recorded in these books. Mm-hmm. Finally, death and Hades themselves are cast into the lake of fire.
Death itself is executed. It's an incredible concept. But, you know, the intense focus on objective judgment here is what gives most modern readers massive pause.
Sure.
I want to play devil's advocate for a moment, because in our current culture, this entire scene sounds like cosmic authoritarianism.
I can see that.
We highly value the concept of personal truth. We value absolute subjective freedom. The idea that what's true for you is true for you, and what's true for me is true for me.
The idea of an inescapable, perfectly objective evaluation of all our works by a supreme judge is deeply uncomfortable. Honestly, it sounds terrifying. People hate the idea of being judged.
It is absolutely meant to evoke awe and a healthy sense of fear, certainly. But we have to view this through the lens of the persecuted people who first read it.
How so?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of ultimate justice, this scene is actually deeply validating.
Validating.
Think about it. We instinctively crave justice when we are wrong, don't we? When we see systemic abuse, when we see innocent people crushed by corrupt politicians, when we see hidden abuses of power, our souls scream for those hidden things to be brought to light.
We demand accountability.
Exactly. If there is no final judgment, then the oppressors ultimately get away with it. The universe would be fundamentally unjust. This text is promising that the universe has a moral arc, and that arc actually resolves. Every wrong will be addressed. So, if you are the oppressor, the white throne is terrifying. But if you are the victim, the white throne is the ultimate vindication.
Precisely.
How do we translate this for the listener today, living in a relatively comfortable modern society, without just paralyzing them with fear?
The modern equivalent is waking up to the realization that our actions have inescapable eternal weight. You are writing the book of your conscience every single day with every decision you make.
Right.
This concept isn't meant to paralyze us. It's meant to imbue our daily choices with profound ultimate meaning. In the modern world, we often feel completely insignificant. We feel like we're just cogs in a massive corporate or social machine, and nothing we do really matters in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, nihilism is huge right now.
Exactly. But this text argues the exact opposite. Accountability is the ultimate validation that human actions matter entirely.
That is a total paradigm shift. Instead of seeing judgment merely as a threat, it functions as an affirmation of your significance. Every hidden act of kindness, every quiet compromise of your integrity, every time you choose to speak the truth or stay silent, it all registers in the permanent fabric of reality. You matter too much for your actions to be ignored.
That's beautifully said.
So think about the story you are writing today. Live today as if the book of your conscience will eventually be read aloud in a silent room. Are your current choices the way you treat your family, the way you conduct your business, writing a story you will be proud to stand by?
And the beauty of being alive right now, in this present moment, is that the book is still open.
You can change the direction of the next chapter.
Exactly. But eventually, the book closes, the judgment is rendered, and that leads directly to what happens after the old world is finally swept away.
Yes, which brings us to chapter 21. With evil, death, and the final judgment permanently resolved, the canvas of the universe is wiped completely clean for a new reality. The text explicitly says the former things have passed away.
To go back to your opening metaphor, the X-ray finally shows a perfectly, beautifully healed bone.
Yes. John details this incredible vision. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth have passed away. And then he adds a very specific, almost strange detail. And there is no more sea.
Ah, yes.
Why point that out? To a modern reader, a world without an ocean sounds like an ecological disaster, or at least a really disappointing lack of beachfront property. Why is no more sea a good thing?
You have to view it through the lens of ancient cosmology. To the ancient Near Eastern mind, and particularly to the Hebrews, the sea was not a place for a relaxing vacation.
No.
No. The sea was a symbol of primordial chaos. It was the terrifying, untamable abyss where the Leviathan lived. It represented danger, storms, and death.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, on a deeply personal level for the author, John was exiled on the penal island of Patmos. He's physically separated from his church, his friends, and his life by the agency.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
For John to write, "There is no more sea," is a profoundly poetic way of saying there is no more chaos, no more terrifying unknown, and fundamentally no more separation from the people we love. The barriers are gone.
That is incredible context. Then John sees the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. We get that bride imagery returning.
We do.
And then we hear a loud voice from the throne delivering what has to be one of the most famous, comforting promises in all of literature. Behold, God's dwelling is with people, and he will dwell with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Neither will there be mourning nor crying nor pain anymore. The first things have passed away.
It is the ultimate teleology, the final intended destination of the human story. It answers the deepest groanings of the human condition. But John doesn't just stop at the emotional and spiritual promise. He spends a significant portion of the chapter giving us highly specific architectural details about this new city, which carry immense symbolic weight.
Yeah, let's look at the dimensions of the city because they are staggering. An angel measures the city with a golden reed, and it is 12,000 stadia in length, width, and height. It is a massive, perfect cube.
Let's break down those numbers. 12,000 stadia is roughly 1,400 to 1,500 miles.
That's huge.
That is the approximate size of the entire known Roman Empire at the time. By making the city that size, the text is subtly claiming that the kingdom of God will completely replace and encompass the empire of man.
And the fact that it's a cube.
That is vital. In the ancient Jewish temple, the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctum where the presence of God literally dwelled, which only the high priest could enter once a year, was a perfect cube.
Oh.
John is saying that the entire city, the whole dwelling place of redeemed humanity, is now the Holy of Holies. The veil is gone. The separation between the sacred and the ordinary has been completely obliterated.
He also describes the walls, which are 144 cubits thick, again, 12 times 12, representing the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles, unifying the Old and New Testaments.
The symbolism is everywhere.
But the building materials are what really catch the eye. The walls are made of jasper. The city itself is pure gold, but gold so pure it is like transparent glass. The 12 foundations are adorned with every kind of precious stones, sapphire, emerald, amethyst. The 12 gates are each made of a single, massive pearl, and the streets of the city are pure gold.
Henry and Barnes both point out the significance of this wealth. To the ancient mind, these materials represented perfect security, unyielding permanence, and immense, incomprehensible value.
But there is a massive economic subversion happening here too, isn't there?
What do you mean?
Well, if you are paving your streets, the place where you walk, where the dirt gathers, where carts are dragged, if you are paving your streets with solid gold, you are making a profound statement about the end of scarcity.
Oh, no, a brilliant observation.
Right. In Babylon, gold was hoarded. People killed each other for pearls and emeralds. It was the basis of their corrupt economy. In the New Jerusalem, the things that humans use to murder each other over are reduced to the status of gravel. They are common paving stones. It completely subverts human economic value systems.
It really does. It's a reality of infinite abundance. John is looking at a spiritual reality of perfect, unhindered communion with the divine, and he has to use the limited vocabulary of a first-century man. He uses the most valuable things in his ancient world to describe a state of being that is ultimately indescribable.
And notice what isn't in the city. Verse 22 says, I saw no temple in it. A holy city with no church, no cathedral, no specific place of worship.
Because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple.
Right.
You don't need a sign pointing to the destination when you have finally arrived at the destination.
Oh.
The entirety of life becomes an act of worship. Furthermore, the text notes there is no sun or moon because the glory of God illuminates it. There is no darkness, literal or metaphorical.
But there is a sharp point of wisdom and discernment here that we cannot skip over because it anchors this beautiful vision in strict moral reality.
The exclusion list.
Yes, the text explicitly states who is kept out of this city. It says that the cowardly, the unbelieving, the murderers, the sexually immoral, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and all liars will have their part in the lake of fire. They are outside the gates. Why include an exclusion list right in the middle of this beautiful utopia?
Because the beauty, the safety, and the peace of the city are predicated entirely on its absolute purity. If you let the corruption, the deceit, and the violence of Babylon back into the New Jerusalem, it instantly ceases to be heaven.
It just becomes earth again.
Exactly. The tears and the pain would immediately return. Perfect peace requires the absolute exclusion of those who refuse to let go of their toxic behaviors.
So how do we translate this vision of the New Jerusalem into our daily lives? Because obviously we aren't there yet. We still live in a world with the sea, with chaos, with crying, and with immense pain.
It provides us with a teleology. It tells us that history is not just a meaningless, cyclical meat grinder. It has a destination.
Okay.
It assures us that our deepest pain is not ignored, and it will eventually be tenderly addressed by the Creator himself. Knowing how the story ends, knowing that justice and peace have the final word, changes how you have the strength to walk through the dark, painful chapters you are facing today.
It makes you wonder how you can bring a piece of that future reality into your present world. How can you bring a piece of the New Jerusalem into your current environment right now? Can you be a presence in your workplace that wipes away a tear instead of causing one?
That's a great challenge.
Can you bring light and clarity to a confusing situation without demanding the spotlight for yourself? Can you foster a pure, undefiled, honest community in your home? We can actually begin practicing the architecture of heaven right now in the middle of the mess.
Which brings us to the very center of that architecture, the final chapter of the book.
Chapter 22. We zoom in from the macro view of the giant golden city to its vibrant, pulsing center, and what we find there is a beautiful literary and theological bookend that connects the very end of the human story back to its absolute beginning.
Yes, the imagery here pulls us all the way back to Genesis.
John says the angel showed him a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God. And in the middle of the street, on either side of the river, was the tree of life.
Just like Eden.
Exactly. In the Garden of Eden, humanity rebelled. They embraced the deception of the serpent, and they were exiled. They were specifically cut off from the tree of life, barred by an angel with a flaming sword. Here, at the end of the story, paradise is fully regained, but it's expanded.
How so?
It's not just an isolated garden anymore. It is a massive, bustling garden city. Humanity isn't just surviving, they are thriving in a community.
And notice the abundance here, too. The tree yields 12 kinds of fruit, providing a fresh harvest every single month. And its leaves, the text says, are for the healing of the nations.
Healing of the nations.
It is an image of constant, abundant provision and perpetual global healing. The nations that used to war with each other are now finding their healing from the exact same source. There is no off-season for the tree of life.
But right after this beautiful restorative image, we hit another massive obstacle to growth. A truly countercultural insight that stops you dead in your tracks.
Verse 11.
Yes, verse 11. The text delivers this chilling, profound directive. He who acts unjustly, let him act unjustly still. He who is filthy, let him be filthy still. He who is righteous, let him do righteousness still. He who is holy, let him be holy still.
It is arguably one of the most sobering verses in the entire Bible.
It really is.
Albert Barnes points out that this signifies the absolute finality of human character beyond a certain point.
It totally challenges our modern notion of infinite flexibility. We love the idea that we always have tomorrow. We love the belief in unlimited time, unlimited second chances, the comforting thought that no matter how we live today, we can always just pivot and change who we are later. Doesn't this verse violate the whole idea of grace and redemption that the rest of the text seems to promote?
It doesn't violate it. It defines the boundaries of human agency. This text warns that eventually the concrete sets.
The concrete sets.
Our choices, repeated day after day, year after year over a lifetime, eventually crystallize into our eternal identity. You become what you have continually chosen to be.
Wow.
If you choose injustice long enough, if you actively resist truth long enough, eventually the universe grants your request. It says, okay, you have chosen to be unjust forever. The door of character locks from the inside.
That is genuinely terrifying. If character eventually becomes permanently fixed, how does the text leave the listener? If I'm listening to this and I realize I've been acting unjustly, does this whole epic book end on a closed door? Does it just end with a lock clicking shut on humanity?
No. And that is the brilliance of how John ends the book. It does not end on a closed door. It ends on a radically, desperately open door. Just a few verses later, verse 17 says, "The Spirit and the bride say, 'Come.' He who hears, let him say, 'Come.' He who is thirsty, let him come. He who desires, let him take the water of life freely."
It's a universal invitation. It's not restricted to a certain class or a certain nationality. Anyone who is thirsty can step up to the river.
Exactly. The warning about character becoming fixed is a reality of the future. The door to the fixed state of eternity is approaching. But right now, in the present moment of the reader, the invitation is wide open. The concrete has not set yet.
So to translate this for you listening right now, we are currently living in the time of the invitation. The choices you are making today, the habits of thought you're forming, the way you speak to your spouse, the integrity you maintain when your boss asks you to lie, those choices are actively, permanently shaping the character of your tomorrow. It makes you step back and ask yourself, what thirst are you currently trying to quench with the muddy, stagnant streams of modern life? Are you endlessly chasing status, wealth, or the approval of strangers on the internet to satisfy a deep soul thirst that those things can never, ever quench? And how can you instead accept this ancient, radical invitation to drink from the clear, freely given water of life?
The water is absolutely free, but you still have to make the conscious choice to kneel down and drink it. No one can force you to take it.
That's powerful.
As we wrap up this deep dive into these final monumental chapters, there's one final provocative thought we have to leave you with.
Okay.
Right at the very end of the scroll, John writes a severe, unmistakable warning. He says, "I testify to everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to them, may God add to him the plagues which are written in this book. If anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, may God take away his part from the tree of life.
Basically, do not mess with the text. Do not edit the message.
Exactly. Now, historically, this applied specifically to this apocalyptic prophecy to ensure its faithful transmission and preservation in an era before printing presses.
Sure, practical preservation.
But philosophically, it asks a much broader, piercing question of us today.
I feel like I know exactly where you're going with this, and it hurts.
How often do we try to edit ancient truths to make them more comfortable for our modern sensibilities? How often do we take a metaphorical pair of scissors to the parts of wisdom that challenge our egos, that confront our greed, or that demand accountability?
All the time.
How often do we add our own little footnotes and rationalizations to justify our favorite flaws? The challenge left ringing in our ears at the end of the book of Revelation is profound. Are we trying to edit the truth to fit our lifestyle, or are we allowing the truth to edit us?
Let the truth edit you. That's the heart of this section. This is wisdom for the present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.